I doubt you can think of anything more precious than the chubby little feet and the tiny toes of a newborn baby. Can you? There's not much out there that's more precious than that. Maybe you could say, well, his hands are pretty irresistible, all those fingers, and the way they like to practice that grip. It's just something special about those little feet. I remember my son had just been born. We took him to church for the first time. Do you remember doing that with your children? You're trying to determine, when should I take them and so forth? When's the best time? And I remember we got to church together and I saw my wife doing something strange. She was holding Joshua like this, and in this hand, she was holding both of his hands. But in this hand, she was sticking out a foot. I was like, what are you doing? She said, everybody wants to touch him. And if they touch his hands, that's the first thing that goes in his mouth. Okay, aren't we protective against those germs of those newborns? They're just as happy to touch a foot. And that doesn't go in the mouth quite as often until you get older like me. But we like to touch those chubby little soft, fat little feet. I love them. And, people are funny. When they see their child for the first time, you know what you did, didn't you? You counted their fingers and toes, didn't you? Be honest. There's something about that. If all these tiny little digits are there, then probably the rest of them's okay too. I remember one of the first questions from my mother-in-law when I made the phone call in the middle of the night from Savannah, Georgia to Indiana to tell her that she was now a grandmother. She tentatively asked, "Does he have all his fingers and toes?" I responded, "He sure does, 12 of each." There was a moment of silence at the other end of the line. I don't know how she puts up with me sometimes. In Luke chapter 2, Mary and Joseph are going to Bethlehem. And verse 7 says, "And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and put him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn." I can almost guarantee you that before Mary wrapped up the Son of God, she counted his toes. As she looked at those chubby little feet, I wonder what she was thinking. Did she think the same thoughts of all new mothers, or was there something more? Did she realize that these feet, these very feet, had stood in the courts of heaven for ages uncountable? Did she think about those feet walking in the Garden of Eden beside Adam and Eve? Did she understand that these feet had walked to Abraham's tent the day that Sarah had laughed at the announcement that she would bear a child in her old age? Did she comprehend that these feet had walked in front of Moses as Moses was allowed to see God's back during the time that this now little finger had written the law of God in stone? Did Mary realize that in a few short years, Jesus' cousin John would feel unworthy to fasten a sandal around this foot? That people would place their loved ones at these feet to be healed? That a demon-possessed man would sit at these feet in his right mind? That a sinful woman would be cast at these feet for judgment to be forgiven? That a woman with her same name would sit at these feet to listen to him teach so much that it would upset her sister, and that he would raise her brother from the dead. That a woman of ill repute would be so grateful for his love and forgiveness that she would anoint these feet with costly perfume and wipe them with her hair. Could Mary comprehend the path that these feet would trod? That they would chase corrupt people from his Father's house. That they would stand in a mock trial. That they would tread uphill bearing a cross. That they would be pierced by cruel spikes. That one day she would gaze up at these feet while her son died. Did Mary understand that these feet would be clasped as women worshiped him after his resurrection, and that they would lift off of the ground as he ascended back to heaven? As she gazed at those tiny feet that had been kicking inside of her womb for many weeks, could she imagine them being described by John in the book of Revelation, the last book of the Holy Scriptures, as bronze glowing in a furnace? If Mary could have believed even a small portion of this, she could have never believed one thing: that the men who had become the closest to Jesus would have ignored these irresistible feet. Turn with me to John chapter 13. Here we find Jesus and his disciples preparing for the Passover, the Last Supper that they would eat together. No servant was there for the customary washing of the guests' feet. As they looked at one another, wondering who would do this menial task, Jesus did something that they would never forget. Look at John chapter 13 and start with verse 3. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things unto his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper. Oh, wait, did you just catch that? Did you just catch that? He had full knowledge at this point as to who he was. That he had come from God and he's going back. And he still stoops to the level we're about to read. He rose from supper, laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. Then he came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered and said to him, "What I'm going to do, you do not understand now, but you will know after this." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Was Peter being humble? It kind of sounds like it, doesn't it? Oh, no. Did Peter know who he was? Remember, Peter was the one that said, "You're the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, yeah, you didn't figure that out by yourself. The Holy Spirit put that in you. Peter knew who Jesus was. And he said, no, you're the King of the universe. You're not going to wash my feet. It sounds humble, doesn't it? It wasn't. Did you know that sometimes our expressions of humility are merely a cover for our pride? Just picture that. Oh no, I would feel strange to have you wash my feet. I would feel, there's pride. I would be uncomfortable having you wash my feet. So this humility is actually covering up some pride. Jesus answered him in these words, that pride is pride away from him for a bit. Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." And I'm not just talking about who sits on my left and who sits on my right. You will not have me as a Savior. Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, Not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. And Jesus said I can picture Jesus chuckling here. Can you ever picture Jesus chuckling? I do it right here. Peter, he who has a bath, he only needs his feet washed. It's completely clean. What's he talking about? I had a man come up to me one Sabbath and said, Pastor, I need to be rebaptized. I said, no, you don't. He said, what do you mean? I said, I rebaptized you last week. He said, no, you didn't. I said, yes, I did. What are you talking about? Remember, we had communion. I washed your feet. Foot washing is a miniature rebaptism. Did you know that? He said, I never thought of that before. And I shared with him this verse. If you've already had a bath, you only need to have your feet washed. Yes, we've had a bath. We've been baptized. But we're still walking around on this dirty soil. We're still mixed up in sin. Yes, we've committed our lives to God, but we're still dirty. And the foot washing is to remind us of the bath that we had. And that's the way it was in Bible times. When you would go and visit somebody, today when we visit each other, we try to make each other comfortable in homes, right? Oh, have a seat, Can I get something to refresh you? There, it was, let's have those feet washed. And what would happen is the servant would come and wash the feet. If you were not wealthy enough to have a servant, guess what? The youngest child did it. That was able to do it. That was your job. And you would pray that mommy and daddy would have another one, so it didn't have to be your job much longer. So the least of the least did the job. The servant of servants did the job. And they only needed their feet washed. It was refreshing to come in. They had been walking on dirty streets, and you know the pollution that donkeys and cattle and goats and sheep, they create. And you're walking through that on the way to the house. Come in, let's cool off those feet, have them washed. I hope you're going on that Cades Cove camp out. I reserved our spot this week. We're going. Have you ever walked around Cades Cove? All the way around. It's beautiful, but your feet get tired. That's 11 plus miles. And right around mile 10 or so is where a nice sized creek crosses under the road. And that's where you take your shoes off and you stick them in that cold water. At first it hurts. Ooh. But you do it because it's refreshing. You know what? Communion hurts, doesn't it? But it refreshes. It gets us going again. It's hard to understand how that happens, but God set this in place so that we would understand what it means to be refreshed from time to time, to be rebaptized in a sense. We had just arrived in Kenya, and we had not learned to drive yet. They drive on the other side of the road. And so what they would do is put you with a family, and they put you'd have a same town day together. You got one afternoon off a week. And that was your chance to go get groceries. And so they would assign you to a family that would take you in to get you groceries, to get you adjusted to being on the other side of the road before you actually started driving, which is wise. And the rainy season had started, and we're riding in the back seat of this family's vehicle, and we're stuck in traffic. It's pouring rain. There's mud everywhere. And the roads, well, you can't even describe them. And we're stuck in traffic in the town of Angara Rongai, close to where we lived. And they have what they call a matatu staging area or stop. And what that is a place where these minivans stop and pick up passengers. They're like taxis. And people stop there and they wait for their ride. And that happens to be where we're stuck in traffic. And I'm looking at these Kenyan people standing there in the rain with their umbrellas, standing in the mud. And they're well dressed. Really are. In fact, there was one lady that caught my attention. She was standing under an umbrella wearing, I guess it was a silk gown, kind of like what you would see as a bridesmaid wearing, and white shoes. And she is standing on a rock about this big, about that high above the mud. And she's standing on this rock. And as I watch, there's a man who is wearing a suit. Maybe they've been to a wedding. I don't know. But he's wearing a suit, and he is standing beside her. I don't know their relationship. I didn't ask. I'm just looking through this rain-streaked window at what's going on. And I saw him stoop down, take out his handkerchief, and start to wipe the mud off of her white shoes. I thought, that is odd. It's pouring rain. He's wiping mud off of her white shoes while she stands on the rock, and I start to get a spiritual lesson there. Isn't that what this is? Because I'm thinking her very next step is going to be where? Back in the mud. All right, how foolish for him to be cleaning her shoes when her next step, right back in it. Well, wait a minute. Isn't that what we do with our communion service? We wash one another's feet. And then we step back into the world. And we sin again and so forth. But we're reminded even more of the forgiveness of God. And it gives us the desire to live more and more from Him. He's willing to clean us up even when He knows we're going to get dirty again. I love Him. And Peter's learning. Notice it says he's had a bath, verse 10, needs only to have his feet washed, but is completely clean. And you are clean, Peter. You're clean. Even though you're about to cut somebody's ear off in a few minutes, you're clean. Even though you're not going to pray with me when I want you to, you're clean, Peter. But not all of you. Who's it talking about? Judas. Judas's heart has been hardened. This was the last attempt to soften it. But notice, Jesus washes his feet too. I love that. That means there's hope for me. Verse 12. So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, and sat down again, he said to them, do you know what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your teacher and Lord, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. Do you notice something missing from this story? Even after all of this, we have no record that anyone offered to wash the feet of Jesus. Not even Peter. Did you ever catch that before? Nobody washed Jesus' feet. The last person that washed Jesus' feet was a woman with her hair that we know of. Even though his pride had been shaken by this act of Jesus, he was still so busy worrying about how he would react that he did not even then become the servant, Peter, and wash the feet of Jesus. Many may be going through that today. We can be so self-conscious that foot washing makes us uncomfortable. But that's what it's all about, isn't it? Being uncomfortable. Putting self aside, bearing your soul, so to speak. I really wish that someone would have washed those precious feet on that night. We have been graciously given a second chance to do just that. Jesus once said in Matthew 25:40, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." So when we follow his command to wash one another's feet, whose feet are we truly washing? As we bow before each other, we're actually worshiping our Creator. What we're going to do now, some reason why you can't do that today, I don't know. That's between you and God and nobody else. You're welcome to sit here in the sanctuary if you like. And if you would care to participate or to observe, maybe this is your first time to hear of such a thing. If you would like to observe, feel free to do that. And the next time join in. That would be fine as well. But we have separate rooms kind of around this way for men and women towards the fellowship hall. And you'll be guided as you get there. And if you would like to join Sister Jane Dyer for children's story, if you're a kid that would like that, that's going to be in the kindergarten room. So there's something for everybody if you would like to participate. And we would now divide up at this time and go and celebrate what Jesus told us to do, to be humble before each other and before him.